We are lucky to have Dr. Fabien Chartier, a well-known Tagore expert from France today. All thanks to the Alliance Française and Mr. Akashen, of course, of our subcommittee. I'm also happy that it almost coincides with Tagore's birthday, almost. So it's a good day to talk about Tagore. And I would now request the director of Alliance Française, Mr. Nicolas Fassino, to introduce Dr. Chartier. Over to you. And from the club, let me offer you a token of appreciation.
Thank you so much. Dear esteemed members, it is with great pleasure and anticipation that I stand before you today to speak about the profound connection between Rabindranath Tagore and France. As we approach the celebrations of Tagore's birth anniversary, it is only fitting that we delve deeper into the intricate web of relationships that Tagore fostered with the French literary and cultural sphere. Rabindranath Tagore, often hailed as the Victor Hugo of India in France, was not merely a poet, as you know, but a visionary whose ideas transcend geographical and cultural boundaries. His works, encompassing poetry, novel, essays, and music, resonate with universal themes of love, nature, and humanism. Tagore's recognition as the first non-Westerner to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913 stands as a testament to the global impact of his literary prowess. Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Fabien Chartier, a distinguished scholar specializing in the intricate ties between Tagore and France. Dr. Chartier's expertise offers us a unique opportunity to explore the multi-faced relationship that Tagore shared with French literature, art, and thought. His research sheds light on the profound influence of French authors and intellectuals on Tagore's work, as well as Tagore's enduring legacy within French literary circles. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Bengal Club for hosting this event. I think it's the first time for the long time, let's say, and we will be, I hope it will not be the last time, because as you know, in Alliance Française, we used to welcome lots of artists, lots of philosophers, lots of writers, and very esteemed personality as Dr. Fabien Chartier. So thank you, and I hope that we will share a little bit the spirit of Tagore tonight, but also of Alliance Française du Bengal, because our mission is to build bridges, cultural bridges. And if Alliance Française would be the first gate to discover the French culture in Bengal, I will say that Dr. Chartier contributed to share also the Bengali culture in France when he published the Quarto, edited by the very prestigious house publishing Gallimard. And it will be, I would say, if you follow me, that you have the other gate of this bridge in France to share the Bengali culture. So thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
I will now request our library subcommittee member, Akashen, to introduce the speaker.
This is my proud privilege today to introduce the speaker, that is Dr. Fabien Chartier, professor specializing in English and intercultural management, Currently serves on the faculty at the University of Rennes. Prior to this, he dedicated several years of teaching at Delhi University. His academic pursuits led him to delve deeply into the reception of Tagore in Great Britain and France, culminating in a thesis titled Genesis of Myth and Use of Symbol. Chartier's scholarly contribution extend beyond academia. He has authored numerous articles and books focusing on India and Tagore's legacy in particular. Notably, he served as the editor of a comprehensive 1430-page illustrated volume published by Gallimard in 2020. This seminal work offers a rich presentation and contextualization of some of Tagore's most esteemed literary pieces. This work was supported by Indian Embassy in France and Vishwabharati. Mr. Chartier is co-founder and vice president of Société des activités de recherche sur l'Inde, l'Université de Toulouse. Fabien Chartier is set to deliver an insightful presentation exploring the dynamic relationship between Tagore and France, delving into the cultural exchanges between Tagore and French intellectuals and artists. Chartier will shed light on their encounters in both Paris and Shantiniketan. During the presentation, emphasis will be placed on Tagore's enduring global significance and his ability to transcend time and borders. Chartier will underscore the importance of engaging with Tagore's multifaceted artistry spanning poetry, fiction, and painting, while recognizing the profound social, educational, and political insights embedded with his works.
So thank you very much for being here tonight. We're going to share a moment, as you said, very close to a moment of commemoration, as it is almost the anniversary of Gurudev's birthday. I'm going to tackle this subject of Tagore in France, as it's untitled here. I'm not going to talk a lot about my own research, but to let you know, in fact, the real title of my thesis was The Reception of Tagore in France and in Great Britain. So it allowed me to compare those two territories. So the idea was, first of all, to give facts, like to remain factual on what happened in France when Tagore went there, and also the impact of Tagore in France. Was he impactful, influential on the whole population, or only a kind of intellectual elite? That's a question which remains to be debated maybe during the answers and questions, but I wanted to tackle this subject earlier than, because I'm going to be very factual and you're going to hear the names of very famous people whom Tagore met, okay? Some literary figures, some Nobel Prizes as well. You will see that he met some very important people in France. But in fact, it is important to keep in mind that he was impactful for the common people as well. And to illustrate this, I'm going to give you an anecdote, because I think it's the reason why, and this will answer a question which was asked to me just before the presentation. How come you became interested in Tagore? As I said, it's a long story, and it started last century. In fact, as anybody else, I've got two grandmothers. Okay. And my two grandmothers were quite different. One of them was from a bourgeois background. Okay, she was from an urban Catholic, quite conservative background, to be more precise. And the second one was from another background, from a lower background, if you could say this, since both of her parents were illiterated. Okay, they didn't know how to write. But she had three things which we really loved, that were the family first, so that's very easy to understand. Then her hometown, which is Saint-Malo, which is situated in Brittany. I'm from Brittany myself. And I've got a kind of tropism for that region. And then poetry. Okay? And that explains why she had this little book of Gitanjali on her bookshelf. And the other grandmother had also a translation of the Gitanjali on her bookshelf. All right. The first one I mentioned was born in 1920. The second one was born in 1913, the very year when Tagore was awarded the Nobel Prize. Okay? So that shows you the vastness or the the variety of the audience or the reading public that Tagore could have at the time. I'm saying at the time because maybe it's no longer the case. Okay, we've got to be honest. In France today, the importance of Tagore has a bit deflated. Okay, could be an exception. But so this was important because I think you need to know this. Tagore was influential at several levels, and maybe the influence of Tagore was not the same at the different levels. And I'm going to explain this because the variety of production in Tagore. You have got mythical poetry, you've got essays, you've got novels, short stories, and so on and so on and so forth. For my grandmothers, poetry was definitely what was really compelling them to the poet. To other people, that would be more essays or even paintings. Okay, that's the variety of the impact. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures. The first one you see here was taken in Paris. Okay, at Albert Cahn's museum. It's situated very close to Paris, in Boulogne-sur-Seine. With those flowers, you could imagine it's in Asia. No, it's in Paris. And I like this picture or this photograph very much because it's in color first, but also because you see this environment. I think it really illustrates, the contact with nature and how it was situated in the midst of nature. Now I'm going to show you other slides and I'm going to comment them and try to be quite factual. Sometimes I might be a bit too specific, so don't hesitate to give me a sign if you get bothered. Okay? So let's show you this first. Okay, this is the map of France on the left, and I'm going to show you where Tagore went. Okay, so that because he visited France 5 times. All right, it's not just okay. Sometimes it was for a long journey, sometimes only for a couple of days. Okay, I'm going to explain that before. So he went to, no, it's not, it's a very small point, but of course he went there quite often as he was invited at Albert Cahn's place near Paris. This is where he spent most of the time. But Albert Kahn had a villa in the south of France called Cap Martin. So when Tagore arrived from India, he would reach this place called Marseille, quite famous, and very close to Marseille you've got Cap Martin. So sometimes when he was in a transit, he would not go to directly to Paris or directly to London. He would stay a couple of days to rest at Cap Martin. Sometimes also when he went, for example, to Argentina, or he should have gone to Peru, he stayed at Cap Martin for a while. This is important because he really liked France. He would receive some very positive vibes. Even sometimes he would go to the United States and would feel really depressed. I've got to say that he was welcomed in America, in the United States. I'm not talking about America, it's something else. But in the United States, he would come back sometimes really disappointed by the people. Even in London, the second time, for example, well, no, I'm saying the second time, but in 1920, when he came back from London, he was disappointed by his former friends. And he went back to France, and he felt that he had people he could speak with. Okay? Sometimes also, I've got to say that he left Bengal is cherished Bengal because he needed it. He needed to go away to come back. And this is like going to and fro all the time. And he would meet some people in France who will share his views. Mainly one person, and I will come back to this, Romain Rolland. Okay? Romain Rolland. And Romain Rolland, in fact, he will meet Romain Rolland in Paris, but also in Switzerland. Okay? Because, in fact, you have to keep in mind that Romain Rolland was in a kind of exile. He was not representing France, really. Romain Rolland got the Nobel Prize in 1915. That means 2 years after Tagore. And there was no Nobel Prize in 1914 because of war. Okay, so we've got like the two main people, thinkers of the time, meeting regularly, writing letters to each other, sometimes with somebody else in between, Kalidash Nag, helping for this relationship. Okay, and sometimes it would be in Paris, but sometimes in Switzerland, because Romain Rolland also he had some health problems. Okay, so he could not go to India. Otherwise, he would have definitely go there. He would have gone there because besides Tagore, he had also some affinities with Gandhi and later with Nehru, and even he knew some people who would not share his point of view, but he systematically would want to meet them. That's something also that he shares with Tagore, like a variety of opinions. Okay. Now, I'm going next slide. I'm not going to go through all the pictures, otherwise it would be too long. Okay. Okay, let's use this. Okay. When we talk about Tagore, Tagore didn't study French. Okay? He did not speak French, only a few words. Okay? But he was surrounded with people who knew French. Okay? The first person is Dwarkanath, because Dwarkanath went to Paris. Okay? He went to Paris and he met Louis Philippe. Okay, so the grandfather, he never met his grandfather, but this is like in the family background, you've got this connection between Bengal and France. Maybe more telling would be the connection between somebody else. Now, sorry about this. I've got an allergy with the dust today, and the heat is very difficult. So, you know that Rabindranath had two nephews, Goganendranath and Abanindranath Tagore, okay, the painters. They had close connections with France, and not only with France, but with illustrations from France. If you know Goganendranath's illustrations, caricatures, you will probably see some connections with the picture on the left, okay? This is a caricature from what we call l'assiette au beurre, which is no longer exists, okay? When I went to Rabindra Bhavan in Shantiniketan, I had the possibility of going through all the books which were about Tagore, on Tagore, by Tagore, the letters which were sent to Tagore, but also some of the documents which were shared by the Tagore family. And I discovered about 100 copies of L'assiette au beurre. Who was reading L'assiette au beurre? Goganendranath and Abanindranath Tagore. And we've got testimonies of this. Okay? It's important because L'assiette au beurre is certainly the first review which caricatures the social policy or politics of politicians in France in a very, very strict way, quite severe way. And when you see the position of some of the Tagore's family, it's important, okay? Now, certainly, even more important is Jyotirindranath. Jyotirindranath Tagore, Tagore's elder brother, was a translator, and he translated Guy de Maupassant, for example. Guy de Maupassant is a short story writer. When we know the importance of short stories in Bengal, okay, But also, when we study short stories by Rabindranath, we can see a connection here. Okay, maybe it's not an invention, but we could feel a strong connection. Jyotirindra also translated Victor Hugo, and a book which I quoted here, maybe you can't read properly, but I will give you the name. It's a book by someone called Victor Cousin. Okay? Victor Cousin is a philosopher. And in fact, Debenendranath, Rabindranath's father, would certainly dive into the Upanishads and Vedas. But also, he was interested in that very book. And that's the reason why Jyotirindra decided to translate that book directly from French to Bangla. Okay? Now, here it's very small. Sorry for the quality of the picture, it's very small. But this is Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme. It's by Molière. It's a very famous French play. Now, Jyotirindra adapted the play by Molière. And who was playing Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme? Rabindranath, and he was 16 at that time. Okay. So that might look insignificant, but we see it's like plenty of elements. Before that, I showed you that Tagore was seen by some of the journalists as a Voltairean. Voltaire, who is Voltaire? Voltaire is a philosopher from France. He's famous for two things. The first thing is being against superstition. Okay? He was truly had faith, okay, even religious faith, but he was against superstition. Maybe we can see a connection here. And the second one is irony. He is the master of irony. I'm not saying sarcasm or cynicism, irony. And he wrote, for example, Candide, which Candide in English doesn't mean the same as in French. Candide means naive. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. Now, let's go. Oh. Now, this is an anecdote. But for those who know Tagore very well, it might be a surprise. This lady that you see here is Alexandra David-Néel. She is not very famous here, but she is in France. She is the first female explorer, having spent years and decades in Tibet, Ladakh, and Sikkim, and having discovered and stayed there for a very, very long time. Okay? And besides being an explorer, she was also very learned. And she sent letters to her husband saying what was going on throughout this period of time. What happened is that Alexandra David-Néel in 1912, so we are before the Nobel Prize, okay, and before Tagore goes to London. Okay, Tagore goes to London in June 1912. Okay, and then starts the beginning of, William Butler Yeats, William Rosenstein, and then he goes directly to the Nobel Prize. I think you know this story when it goes very fast and he gets to the Nobel Prize. In March 1912, Alexandra David-Néel goes to Calcutta before going up in the Himalayas. And what happens? Tagore asks for letters of recommendations. Okay, so you cannot see the date here because this is the letter. It's a copy from Rabindra Bhavan. And here, 17th of March, 1912. Letters of recommendation. Originally, Tagore should have gone on the 19th of March, 1912, and gone to Marseille, and then go up to London. But in between, there is Lyon and Paris. So the idea was to meet people in Paris before going to London. Okay? And these are letters of introduction to some great men of letters. They're not famous today. I'm not going to get bothered about that. But just keep this in mind, it's important. He knew that that Paris was the place to be at the time, culturally, artistically. But he went to London because he felt sick. So he went to London, he didn't leave in March, but in June. And in between, he kept on translating the Gitanjali into song offerings. Okay, you know this story. And he started translating himself. But he arrives in London and he meets people, and there is a small publication, not straight away song offerings, but 2 poems of Gitanjali are published in the Times. And there is a French person called Saint-Jean-Perse here, who reads those 2 poems. He's very young, he's 21, and he will become the Nobel Prize in 1960. Okay? He's a young poet. He sees those poems and he's fascinated. He says, that's something we've never seen before. So he knows that Tagore is in London, and he asks Fox Strangeways, who is the agent of Tagore at the time, he says, can I see Tagore and have a meeting with him? Yes. So the people meet, and Saint-Jean-Perse says, listen, you have to find a translator in France straight away. Let me give you 2 names. Those names are Paul Claudel, who's a very, very famous poet, and André Gide. Okay? And the selection will turn to André Gide. Who is André Gide? Another Nobel Prize later. He is at the time the director of Gallimard, what would become Gallimard. In fact, it's La Nouvelle Revue Française, but people are working hands in hands. We are just before the war. Remind this. War begins in 1914. We're really close to it. And Gide is the director of La Nouvelle Revue Française. I'll make it short here, but just for your knowledge, in fact, Gide was not the first translator of Tagore. There were 2 less known people who had started translating Tagore. And they had already published Tagore in some very famous reviews. Their names won't ring a bell to anyone, but this is important because Gide really struggled hard to get the rights. And not only the rights to publish, but to have the exclusive rights. Okay? And this will have a consequence because war is coming. So Gide starts translations. He starts the translation of Gitanjali, which will become Le Fleuron Lyrique. This is the title you can see here. He will also translate another work, which is probably one of my favorite piece of work by Tagore. It's the Gar, it's the post office. Okay, it's a play. Okay, Amal ou la lettre roi. Okay, when I say Amal, I think you know what I mean. In fact, Amal is still performed in France. It's still performed in France in hospitals because of the positivism of the God. They are keeping on performing that play. Usually it's amateur plays. And where do they play it? In spaces for children. Children with cancer, and this is a source of positivism. Okay? Very important. So he goes through those 2 translations, but he will never complete the 3rd one. He had started translating poems of Kabir. Okay? But he will stop. Maybe he was a bit fed up. That's something I will talk about later. But the fascination of Gide for Tagore faded away. Okay? A bit like Yeats, by the way. And we've got similar attitudes. In fact, the Western people will tend to be fascinated first and then to release their fascination, and sometimes it becomes indifference. Okay? This is a phenomenon which repeats itself. I'm living it day by day. Now, war came in, and it's another reason why there were no publications between 1914 and 1918, World War I. But Tagore goes to Japan in 1916. And what is going to happen? He speaks to the Japanese and he gives that famous message of India to Japan, which is basically about imperialism. A very important text saying to the Japanese, listen, you're doing exactly the same stupid thing that the Europeans did to become, settlers and so on. You should not do the same. Okay. Romain Rolland will read that text in English. Romain Rolland was not very good at English, but he was assisted by his sister. So he reads that message of India to Japan. And he wants to contact Tagore immediately, and there will be a beginning of a relationship through letters, epistolary relationship. Now let's go to 1920. Okay, I've got to select the elements. Sorry for this, but of course there should be more transitions, but it's only 40 minutes. So Tagore goes to Paris in 1920. It's not the first time. In fact, in 1878, he spent two days there. And in 1890, he sends a letter to Mrinali Devi, his wife, from the Tour Eiffel. There is a nice picture of it. But let's go back to 1920 and 1921. He will spend several weeks there at Autour du Monde, the place I mentioned before. This is Albert Kahn, by the way, the person I talked about, the banker who was also a patron. And I said, if you go to Paris, visit the place, Albert Kahn Museum and Albert Kahn Gardens. The first picture you saw was from that garden. A very beautiful place. So he went there and he met many people straight away. Some of them are quite famous. Sylvain Lévy is one of them. Sylvain Lévy spent one complete year at Shantiniketan in 1921. That means the first year of the Vishva Bharati. He came there as an Indianist and an Orientalist. So he's a specialist of Tibetan and Pali, and he will start what Shri Mohan Sen will do later. Okay? So it's very important. It's a key figure there. Another person who spent a lot of time in Shantiniketan is André Carpelles, and she's also a painter. She painted this one. Okay? It's a very beautiful painting, and a copy of it is at the Rabindra Bhavan. And the person on the right is Henri Bergson. Henri Bergson is a very famous philosopher. He's also a Nobel Prize. 1927. Now, Bergson and Tagore met twice. Now, if you had time and if you had good eyes, you saw that quotation below, which is very abusive. This is from Bergson, okay? Saying that basically he assesses that there is a kind of superiority from the Western world compared to the Eastern world. This is not an exception. This is not an exception. The people whom Tagore will see belong to two categories. There are those with whom you can sympathize and those who will systematically adopt a point of view of being superior. That's the reality. Okay? We cannot ignore this. And though Bergson is really into philosophy and into something we call French spiritualism, which is not devoid of Oriental thought or Eastern thought, he believes in a kind of separation between those two hemispheres, which Tagore is fighting against strongly. I'm sorry about this. Another thing that Tagore does in 1920 is to go to the battlefield. So he's going to see where the people died during the war. And he went to see Reims Cathedral, which was completely destroyed. And this is a very important event for him. Emotionally, he is touched. We can see this in the letters that he sends at the time. Okay? I'm not going to give you too many pieces of information here, and I will turn to let's do this. He also gives a conference at Musée Guimet. If you go to Paris, you will see this beautiful place. It's a museum of Asian arts. If you got a possibility of going there, you'll see plenty of sculptures, which unfortunately you cannot find in India, because everything was collected by the Westerners. Sorry about this. Don't fight me. Haimsa. But yes, indeed, it's the situation is like this. He went to Strasbourg as well. You know, Strasbourg is today the European capital, okay? It's in the east part of France, and it's really in between Germany and France, and sometimes it went the other side. So give me a comparison to it, more or less like Lahore, okay? But the thing is that he went to Strasbourg and talked to the Indian community there in 1921, because the Indian community used to be in Paris before, and they moved to Strasbourg because they had to consolidate in Strasbourg the feeling of French people and friendship as well. So that's the reason why they were very famous academic people going to Strasbourg. But this is okay. Sorry for the quality of the photographs here, but this is taken in Chantilly-Niketan. So you see Professor Sylvain Lévy here teaching in Chantilly-Niketan. You see, this is a painting by André Carpeles here. Of course, she spent a lot of time in India. Oh, and sorry, I almost forgot. This is a letter signed by somebody very famous called Marguerite Yourcenar. If you know French literature, you will know that Marguerite Yourcenar is basically the first person to enter the French Academy of Arts and Letters. And more than that, she revolutionized French 20th century literature, because she's, I would say, the first feminist, truly, in terms of, you know, bringing a real female approach to literature. Very important figure for the French people. So Marguerite Yourcenar sends a letter to Tagore in 1922. This was a discovery. I went to Rabindra Bhavan and saw that letter, a blue piece of paper, signed Marg Yourcenar. And it was among a pile of letters from people, unknown people, common people. I just like fell from my chair and said, oh my God. And then I carried out some research, and Marguerite Yourcenar pointed out in her autobiography that she had been influenced by Tagore when she was young. So when she was 18 or 19, she sends that letter to Tagore, plus a little book she was really proud of, her first novel. Or maybe you know that person, Victoria Ocampo. Okay, so this is very famous. So Victoria Ocampo was from Argentina, okay, you know this, but she was a Francophile. She knew French perfectly. She spent years and years in France. She had some relationships with French people as well, but she was really into French literature. And when Tagore, you know, Tagore wanted to go to Peru, and maybe it's a good thing, because, you know, Peru was not really a nice place to stay at the time. He fell sick and went to Argentina and spent some time to recover there. And Victoria Ocampo tried to teach him French there, and read several poems of Charles Baudelaire to Tagore. Okay, it's you can see that quite easily. He didn't like Baudelaire, which is understandable. I like Baudelaire, but I don't see any points in common between Tagore and Baudelaire. It's really difficult to find some. Oh, all right. I'm going to read that passage because it's dated 1925, okay? And this is, to me, exemplary of that relationship that Romain Rolland and Tagore had. You'll see how profound that friendship was through that quotation. So this is Tagore speaking. Sorry for... My dearest friend, I return broken and exhausted. I come back to a country that is busy with many other things, that is not free to think about me or my ideals. I feel I'm not needed here, at least for the time being. I fear that my people will continue to regard my ideals of international friendship as premature, much more as a poetic luxury that our age cannot afford to indulge in. But at the same time, I feel I have a country of my own, a friend of my own, and collaborators and helpers in my cause. I discover them all in one through you, through your profound friendship. This discovery gives me strength, confidence, and ultimate joy in this same evening ebb of my life. Okay. He is speaking about his own country, saying that he is feeling disappointed. Yeah? 1925, you've got the context in mind. Okay. I'm not going to enter politics today. Oh, yesterday I was in Chantenagor. And I had the chance of going to the French Institute there. I spent some time in Chanteniketan, but I had never been to Chantenagor. And I didn't know what it looked like. Okay? And I understood a lot of things. In fact, in Chantenagor, Tagore went several times in Chantenagor. And you see this place, I had confirmation because I didn't know where he was staying. He was staying exactly here. This is the place where he was staying. In fact, he stayed at two places, this one and one which is here. Okay? This was confirmed to me by someone who is the director of the Institut Français. Okay? Mrs. Pal. At the time, of course, this is earlier than 1880 because he started going there very, very early. The first time he went there with Jyotirindranath and Kadambari Devi, but also later on in his old age, he felt he would go to Chantenagor because of the heat. Let me give you a passage, a quotation here. Christine Bosnek, I don't know if you know Christine Bosnek. Christine Bosnek was the director of the French Alliance in the 1950s and 1960s. We are young people, so of course it's too early. But in fact, Christine Bosnek spent 5 years in Chanteniketan between 1935 and 1940. And she was the director of the boarding school there. Okay? And with her, there has been a doubling of the girls studying at Chanteniketan. So she's not a nobody. You can see her on the picture with Rani Chando here. Okay? The quotation is here. And I find it very funny because, in France, we don't know that Tagore had a sense of humor. So let me read this. Tagore was content to spend the warmer months near Chantenagor with the mischievous humor that brought such charm to his conversation. He said to me one day, "You're living from France, but I'm going there too." And seeing how surprised I was, he added, "Mais oui, I'm going to Chantenagor." Is that beautiful? Of course, hopefully Chantenagor is now independent. I'm not nostalgic, but this is how it's a sense of humor. Now I'm going to show you the last picture. I'm not going to talk about 1930, but keep in mind that in 1930 Tagore goes back to Paris and he spends time there to show his paintings, and then he will become famous in Paris. The paintings will travel the world, and he thought that the Europeans will understand his paintings more than his poems. I don't know if it's true. Obviously, I think that, in fact, I came to like his paintings quite lately, personally speaking. I don't know for you, it's sensibility, but and I don't see any discrepancy now. But when I approached them at the beginning, I felt, no, that cannot be the same person. But now I understand perfectly. Okay, but I'm not sure that the French people are so fond, for example, of his paintings today. There might be an exception, but now the last slide I want to show is this one. Okay, if you go to Paris, there is a statue of Tagore in Parc Tagore and in Rue Tagore. There is a street dedicated to Tagore. That means that we are commemorating Tagore often every 10 years. Okay, that next time it will be probably 2031. Okay. So, for example, this is from the UNESCO. Huh? So we usually we have manifestations, and the Indian diaspora helps a lot there. Now, I wanted to show you these 4 books here, because I was introduced before as an expert on Tagore. I cannot be an expert on Tagore, I'm honest. I know a lot about Tagore, I've spent a lot of time on it, but I don't speak Bengali. So I'll never be an expert, all right? I think so. I know things, but I won't be an expert. A French person was an expert. Her name was France Bhattacharya, is France Bhattacharya. She's 91 years old, but she's the expert, okay? And she started translating not only Tagore, but Bankim and Vibhuti Bhushan, and she did some great work. So these are, for example, 4 books which had never been published before, directly from Bengali to French. Because, as you know, in France, and it's very unfortunate, we rely on the English translations. So that means that each time we're losing a little bit. Well, I tried my best, not knowing Bengali, so this is what I edited. So I'm going to give it to you. If you've got time, you will see that my work is basically, I'll complete, it's finished. You will see that at the beginning it's more the life of Tagore, and then the work of Tagore. And at the end, some pages are dedicated to some aspects. For example, Tagore and arts, Tagore and his contemporaries. So it required a lot of work, which didn't require the knowledge of Bengali. When it does, I felt, no. That's the reason why I do not speak so much about his literature, because I want to remain humble, okay? So thank you very much. I think we've reached the time limit. So I can give this so that you can have a look if you want. All right. It has suffered from the journey.
Hello, our subcommittee member, Mr. Monojit Dashgupta, will conduct the interactive session. You're free to ask questions, please.
First of all, Dr. Fabien Chartier, merci beaucoup. It's a fantastic, beautiful, insightful couple of slides, which threads to our mind, to the lay listener, for the most part, Tagore's connections with France, and through France possibly to the world. We have a very interested audience amongst us, so we'll take questions straight away, or observations which you could then react to. If there's a deathly silence, then I'll squeeze in a few observations of my own, because I'd be interested in getting a little insights into areas that remain question marks for me. So without any further ado, let's have some hands up. Yeah. If you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Pratik Kaur. I've been a member of the Institute Club for 50 years. I think beyond that, I do not explain myself. It's about your point. I think je dois to felicitate the exposition très bien, très bien. To compléter, rechercher, très bien. Anyway, let me say it in Bengali, because already I have to compliment you for a wonderful, well-researched presentation. Okay, thank you. Now coming back to my question, I was wondering, three things. I'll be short because there are others also who want to speak. Don't you think that he translated Victor Hugo? Victor Hugo. 4 poems of Victor Hugo. Tagore.
Which poems?
I'll tell you the date, both in French and English. See, the 15 février 1843, yeah, et La Poète par Victor Hugo, et Hier au soir, et Unité. Yeah. These are 4 poems translated by Tagore when he was in Chandranagar.
You mean Jyotirindranath?
No, Tagore.
Tagore. So he translated them from the English?
He said Bengali. He translated from French to Bengali. You'll find them in Prabhat Sangit.
Yeah, but he did not speak French, so it had to be from English.
I don't know that, but his Bengali translation is Kobi, the poet, Kobi, Tara o Akhi, which is the star and the eye, the Shurjo o Phul, and Visarjan. There are a lot of, he wrote number of Visarjans, not one. He wrote a poem, he wrote 3 poems by same name. He wrote a natok by Visarjan, and the first poem, Visarjan, was a translation of Victor Hugo. The second point, I thought you may like to touch upon, you know it very well, much more than me, because you've done it work so thorough. First thing is, Bergson and Tagore met in Paris. And somebody who was present there, the entire translation, entire meeting has been mentioned in Modern Review. And the person who said is very funny because Bergson had a big head and very short stature, and Tagore was a huge 6-footer. When Tagore entered the room, Bergson was looking up to him. That was very funny. But Bergson influenced Tagore very much. In fact, it's Bolaka. Bolaka is entirely based on Bergson's philosophy.
Okay. I think you're right.
Bolaka, it begins with Shondarage, Jilimi, Jilame, Sotkali Baka, Tolovar, Kapetaka. That's all.
I would just, if we can get Fabien to make some observations and react.
Okay, about Bergson, it's very interesting because for those who do not know Bergson, in fact, is the main representative of what we call French spiritualism. What is French spiritualism? We are dealing here on something which is really close to Brahmo Samaj. Because, in fact, or Advaita, it's really close to is Brahma and Atma the same? I'm going to use English terms there because I don't want to get confused, and I'm not a philosopher myself. But for Bergson, the idea is that to the difference of, for example, Descartes or Kant, those philosophers who are strictly on rationality, he makes a difference between the matter, which means materialism, and the mindset. What is a mind or mindset? It is the subconscious, the faith. Faith is into it. Everything which could even be irrational. Okay? And he says that, in fact, scientists or positivists that's the name which is given to the movement, who are strictly into science, are forgetting emotion. Okay. So he says there is something else than something which is just on the surface. There, I think he meets Tagore. But he makes a difference. To him, this is a difference between nature and matter. So there is a difference. Whereas I think that in Tagore there is absolutely no difference at all. But maybe I'm wrong. But when I read Tagore, I see really you're part of it. We are part of it, and the whole thing is Brahman. So I think there is a difference. When I showed you that quotation, which was really abusive, that was by Bergson, that shows something. That shows that, okay, philosophically speaking, they may have things in common, but there is always this feeling of being a superiority.
Yeah. Actually, the meeting between Tagore and Bergson in Paris, Bergson agreed with most of the points with Tagore, and also agreed with the point that Bergson says, Indians are always in a very special world. But when it comes to scientific pointing, Indians lack that discipline. So Bergson agreed exactly. That is why we are not progressing.
Mr. Corey, we take a few other people who may be interested in posing some issues or some comments. Please.
My name is Deepak. You mentioned that outset that Tagore had an appeal to common people in France as well. And you mentioned about your grandmother. Apart from that, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, I will.
There's a second question, if I may, and that is that apart from Gitanjali, did France or the French publishers translate any other work of Tagore, prose or poetry or essays or anything? Thank you.
No, sorry. I'm asking for the book to carry on because it will answer partly your questions. In fact, let's start with the common people. So, by chance, well, I was very fortunate to go to Rabindra Bhavan because in the Rabindra Bhavan, you have files, but mainly those files are with famous people. So, for example, you've got a file, Tagore and Gide. Easy. You've got like 2 or 3 letters. And it goes on like for very famous people. And then there is a huge file, like, or maybe 3 files, of letters sent by people unknown, who sent letters to Tagore, but like just to testify that they really enjoyed his poetry. And it's massive. If you compare the number of letters sent by these common people to so that's the first thing, but also there is an anecdote, I think it's given by Rathindranat on The Edge of Time. Tagore takes a taxi. It's very funny there. He takes a taxi to go from one place to another, and the driver of course drives, and at the end of the course he says that he knows who he is. Of course I know who you are. You are Rabindranath Tagore. He's a taxi driver. Okay. In fact, politically speaking, there were 2 reviews which were communicating on Tagore more than the others. The first one is called Europe. Europe, in French, is led by Jean Guéhenno. He's not very famous either, but he's basically the leader of what would be in between socialism and communism. Okay? And the second newspaper is L'Humanité, which is definitely a communist newspaper. So the people who, well, there was a communication on Tagore from the left-wing parties. So it's very interesting because you've got like Catholic people would read Tagore through the mystic poetry because it was really kind of, you know, those psalms or this ecumenism that we call this, like you can share, you know, Hinduism or, you know, everything is the same. Okay. But on a political point of view, Tagore was seen as the leader of, well, Romain Rolland said it. It's above the fray. Being above the fray, that means being a sentinel, in a sense, or being sufficiently high to see the dangers coming. And Romain Rolland wanted Tagore to be the leader of that movement, to be independent, and to be above the fray, to be able to say, you're wrong, just as he did in Japan. Okay? And this was seen by the left-wing parties as a sign of courage. So the French press would definitely go towards this message more than, for example, a right-wing newspaper. So it was a variety of public audience, of reading public. Now, the second... Yeah.
Second. Mr. Mukherjee.
I was just wondering if, apart from Gitanjali, any other work of Tagore has been translated around that time?
Oh, yes. Yes, and in fact, it's so the book will show you it's a miscellaneous of plenty of short stories, novels, poems, which were translated basically between 1914, Gitanjali, until quite recently. Because, for example, we've got Puravi, which was translated just at the occasion of the release of this book. As far as novels were concerned, we had to wait a long time. I am going to be very honest with you. My favorite work of Tagore, with Amal, is Gora. Okay? In France, you have to wait until 1961 to have a version of Gora. Okay? By the way, the person who writes Gora, who translates, Gora, is a priest from France, okay? But he lives in Calcutta. Okay? Yeah. But Gaire Baire would have been translated earlier than that. Okay? And some short stories as well, because of Christine Bosnek in the 1950s. It's heterogeneous, but what we have first is his mystic poetry or love poetry, romance, and then some essays, sadhana, but I find sadhana extremely complicated for a Western mind. Some people are really interested. It's still read through sadhana because yoga is kind of craze now today in India, I know, but also in France. I'm kidding, but in France it's taking a lot. So people are really interested in everything which is more spiritual. Okay, so when they see sadhana, they have heard the word, so they want to discover it, and they see sadhana, so they're going to bite. But I find it very complex. Honestly, that's not the first thing I would recommend if you read Tagore.
We have Professor Uma Dasgupta amongst us. Umade, any thoughts? Any thoughts?
Namaskar. Namaskar. So I've actually all along been quite in agreement with almost everything that you said. True.
I had not recognized you.
No.
I'll sneak
No
in a
reason
quick
why you
one
should.
of my own. And Fabien, we heard the exchanges with Romain Rolland and that he was engaged in many ways through the difficult part of translations done by other people. There's this little confusion that I have when I read in public literature that there was a little perhaps misunderstanding. That is the common phrase used in some literature and some historical texts about Tagore being misunderstood by Romarola on his visit to Italy. And whether that features in any of your research, was that resolved?
No, I can speak about it. In fact, I think there is a kind of different point of view on the question, and in fact, a good way of understanding. Chimnoy Guha is not here today, but Chimnoy would know.
Yeah, would know definitely a little more.
Yeah, but I can give you an insight on this, if I may. In fact, Romain Rolland, he wrote a kind of diary, which is called Land, so India, and he would write all his impressions related to India. And dealing with this episode, let's call it like this, there are three people to mention. There is Tagore, there is Romain Rolland, and there is Georges Duhamel. Georges Duhamel is a novelist, a critic. In fact, the Duhamel family is very important in France today for several reasons. But they're very famous journalists. Georges Duhamel has a very strong position. Is far more aggressive. When Tagore comes back from Italy, he goes directly to Switzerland, and when Tagore relates the episode, he says, "No, you did not do enough." Okay? I think that Romain Rolland is just stuck in the middle. And he's not really satisfied. And the Manchester Guardian, there's this letter sent by Tagore to the Manchester Guardian to clarify the situation, saying, basically, I am an anti-fascist, and I've been used. Okay, but for Romain Rolland, he had not been specific enough earlier. And I'm going to tell you, I don't want to be judgmental here, and it's a polemic thing, but fascism, and Mussolini in particular, is not the only one not to have seen. If he have not seen at the particular moment, he's not the only one. Okay? Many people would not see that, they were manipulated. Same for Adolf Hitler. I mean, you've got people going to Germany at the time, and they don't understand what's going on. It's really easy, in retrospect to say, well, this guy is a fascist, you should have seen here. In fact, it's true and untrue. Georges Duhamel was pointing at Tagore that, no, let me introduce you to people who are really suffering from fascism, and you're going to realize something. But honestly, it's really easy. It's like today, being judgmental on a situation like Ukraine and Russia, it's difficult to be very objective. We are closer to the phenomena, and we would tell you, why, Russia is behaving very aggressively. India should not remain, in the middle. Okay, but who are we to say this? It's difficult to say.
True. We'll change tack. Let's get some other views.
This is in continuation with what has just been said. Only two things. In 2019 or 20, I'm forgetting, there has been a full book on Mussolini and Tagore by, I'm forgetting the name of the author, but the surname is Kundu, and he is, or was then, the director. Kollan Kundu, and he was then the director of the Tagore Center in London. And it's a wonderful book, and it gives you all the, including the entire text of the letter that was published in the Manchester Guardian. So if you're interested in that issue, you can read that. The other piece of information that I wanted to share with you, as a matter of fact, the entire diaries of Romarola were translated into Bangla by Obonti Shannal even before it was translated into English. So those of us who can read Bangla can read the entire thing.
Very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for this precision. In fact, it's interesting because for the book, I'm going to say a few words about the book, which is circulating here. I'm not making any publicity because it's really difficult for you. It's in French, so people who do not speak French, it's impossible. It's not translated. Don't ask. In fact, the objective of the book was definitely to help to make French people read again and understand again. So contextualizing a little bit of this. But mentioning the Tago Center. We received their help for some of the pictures, and we also received their help from Rabindra Bhavan. So it was a collaborative work. I was there only to edit the book and select, and also I did more than that. but it was a long process. But the result, I'm really happy with this, because I think it's illustrated a bit like, those slides. I think it helps a lot because, there is the distance of years. And also because it was really well done by Gallimard, who's it's a very famous publishing house in France, and probably the most famous one. And, and the aim of publishing and being read was a success. Because we received very good criticism from the press. Unfortunately, the book was released on the 22nd, 2020. That means just before the lockdown. So it was a disappointment because we wanted to launch this book for the Forum du Livre in Paris, which is the big fair in Paris. So the date was just before, and unfortunately we couldn't do that. But however, the journalists and the specialists were very, very happy with this. But again, I have to say one word about France Bhattacharya, because that would be unfair not to, she did what nobody did before, okay? And she's 91 today. And every time I can speak, I say, don't forget what she did, because otherwise, there would be a big gap. So it's very important to quote her.
Any other? Just one point for me. Fabien, I was, in the 20s, with the 1920 visit, I think. I think that was the trip when he met Sylvain Levy? Okay. He seems to have gone around a fair bit of looking at art in that visit. I don't know, they may have been private galleries at that point, not public galleries as we see them today. Is there any, in your research, have you seen any evidence of him being naturally there's any affinity to any particular group of artists that might have influenced him or may have enjoyed viewing?
I'll go back to these 1920s, but I had an observation. Yesterday I was giving another conference, and there is something which has never been translated in French. These are the travelogues. So I'm talking about 1978, for example, and 1990s. 1990 to be very precise, concerning France. I'm mentioning this because apparently when he goes to Paris, he visits a museum there. This is what was information which I was lacking, but apparently he goes to the Eiffel Tower, okay? But also he visits some museum in Paris, probably le Louvre or another place. Don't forget Abanindranath Tagore there, because in 1914 their works are exhibited in Paris. In 1914, yeah, with the School of Calcutta, there is Mukulde, unknown, you know, it's a whole delegation there. And it goes on during the 1920s, there is this influence going on. About 1920, about what? Is it raining? Yes. My God. Sorry. I just like, because I've not been singing though. Yes. No, I was said yesterday that there should be some Rabindra Sangeet at the end. So yeah, 1920 or 1921. I know that he goes to the opera, for example. Opera. Yeah, he goes and see Faust by Gounod. He goes to the opera, and he goes to an atelier, but that must be in 1930. He goes to Bourdelle. Bourdelle is a sculptor, very famous one. He goes there with Mukulde because it's just by chance. I was in Delhi University and I met someone called Mr. Ukil, Babla Ukil. He's in Shantiniketan. Mukulde is an Ukil family is there. Well, anyway, and I found out in Mukulde's archives that Tagore went to Bourdelle's. But about 1920, I couldn't find information. I know that he went to Musée Guimet before giving his speech. Okay, because in fact he went and visited Musée Guimet in 1920, and he gives his lecture in 1921. So there is, because he goes twice to Paris, beginning and the end of his journey. But unfortunately, I cannot really answer your question about art. In fact, I have not studied this aspect in particular, but I don't know, no. I wouldn't.
I think we've had a tremendous session, a great session, insights, some heavy research coupled with little trivia that might have interested a lot of us. Thank you very much, Dr. Fabien Chartier. Thank you very much, Alliance Française.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Raka. Now, to give a formal vote of thanks, may I request one of our colleagues in the subcommittee, Dr. Choitali Moitro. Choitali, this is yours.
Good evening, everyone. A big thank you on behalf of the Bengal Club, especially the Library Subcommittee, to Dr. Fabien Chartier for this riveting evening, particularly in this week of the Bengali Boishakh Mash. So thank you to Raka for organizing this. Thanks to the Alliance Française. Many thanks to our chair for introducing Dr. Chartier, and thanks to my colleague Monojit Dasgupta for taking over for the interactive session. Of course, thanks to this brilliant audience and the supports we have had from the technical group. Thank you all. It's time for me to call upon Raka Sen to please do the honors to Dr. Chartier on behalf of the club. Good evening, everyone, and goodbye.